Good day everyone and welcome to our first topic, which is all about the requirement analysis and modeling. This is somewhat the same with the subject software engineering, wherein we are going to discuss all of the models that we needed in order to create a particular system based on our documentation later on. So our first topic is on the requirement analysis and modeling, wherein we get to create a document where we put all of our analysis and also the different requirements needed for a particular system. So may I just read the introduction first before we proceed to the learning objectives and to the lesson proper. So on the introduction, it says here that requirement analysis and modeling are significant steps in developing any kinds of software. It reviews all requirements and provides a graphical view of the entire system using diagrams. After the completion of the analysis, it is expected that the understandability of the project may improve significantly. This unit covers the topics on software requirement specification, steps in requirement analysis, data flow diagram and entity relationship diagrams, and create data dictionaries files. Okay, so as you can see on the introduction, it says all of the units that we need to cover, or all of the topics that we need to cover on the first unit of our module. So it says here that it will review the requirements analysis and modeling will review all of the requirements needed, and it will provide a graphical view. Thus, we make use of different relationship diagrams just like ERD and DFD. So you are expected to create those things later on. Do not worry, I will be assisting you in creating those types of diagrams. But for now, let us know first the essence of requirement analysis and modeling. So we have here the learning objectives. It says here that at the end of this unit, students will be able to do the following. Number 1, understand the importance and use of software requirements specification report in software development. Number 2, learn the different features and properties of a good SRS document. SRS stands for Software Requirements Specification. And number 3, construct a software requirements specification report. Don't worry, I will not let you create the complete software requirements specification report. I will just show you how to create one, and just the different parts, or just the parts that you need to do. No, I will not let you do all of it. We just have to create something so that you will know how to do it later on. Okay, so let's proceed on the presentation of contents. We have 6 pages for this unit, so please listen carefully, especially if I'm going to explain each one of them. Okay, so let's start. May I just read? The production of the requirements stage of the system of the software development process is what we call software requirement specification, or we call it requirements document. Okay, so I will just highlight this one. Okay, SRS, and then requirements document. Ayan. Sabi niya here, so the production of the requirements stage of the software development process is what we call the software requirement specifications, or yung shortcut term na is SRS, or yung other term na ay requirements document. So this report lays a foundation for software engineering activities and is constructing when entire requirements are elicited and analyzed. SRS is a formal report. Ayan. Let's highlight this one. SRS is a formal report which acts as a representation of software that enables the customers to review whether it is according to their requirements. Ayan. Enables, I would just highlight this one because the things that I highlight is they are self-explanatory, but I would like to highlight it for us to know more or for us to understand more this definition. So it says here that SRS daw is a formal report which will act as a representation. When it says act as a representation, as example, if you're going to build a house, of course there is a visual representation of that particular house para makita nila yung end product mo later on. Ganito pala yung itsura na magiging bahay ko later on. So what are these representation na pwede natin gamitin? Ayan, pag nagpapatayo tayo ng bahay, meron tayong blueprint or yung CAD, yan, yung ini-edit sa CAD, or drawing yan, ayan, and then they put the colors, the sizes of the materials, everything, so that alam ng customer or alam ng owner ng bahay kung ano ang magiging itsura later on ng bahay niya. Because napaka blurry naman nung thought na magpapatayo ka ng bahay, hindi mo alam kung ano magiging itsura niya. Ayan, masusurprise ka na lang, ganito pala yung itsura ng nagawang bahay. Hindi mo pala gusto yung kulay, hindi mo pala gusto yung type ng bahay. So, this is the first thing that we need to know, no? You need to know the requirements set by the customer. So, it says here that yung SRS po natin, or yung software requirements specification, yun yung una nating dapat na ginagawa, no? Kasi siya yung parang nag-a-act as a blueprint or a visual representation ng software na gagawin mo para sa customer niyo later on. It says here, it enables the customers to review whether it is according to their requirements. Yan, sinusupport din nito yung sinasabi na the customer is always right. Bakit kaya? Kasi sila po yung end user, sila yung gagamit, sila yung, for example, bibili dito sa store, ayan, bibili sila ng product, sila yung gagamit. So, based on their preferences, yan po yung pinakaunang thought. Kaya sinusupport yung the customer is always right. It enables the customer to review. Ayan, doon nila titignan kung, ito ba yung requirement ko before? I think ito yon. Ito hindi ko sinabi ito na ilalagay ninyo. So, please remove it. Ayan. Meron pag-uusap later on, no? So, that is the first step para sa ating topic. Software requirements specification. Ayan, from the customer. So, also, it comprises user requirements for a system as well as detailed specification of the system requirements. So, highlight ko pa rin ito. Comprises user requirements as well as detailed specification. Ayan, detailed specification of the requirements. Hindi yung sasabihin mo sa customer, basta ganito yung mangyayari, nang hindi mo ine-explain yan ng detalye sa customer mo. We have also to understand that in building a particular software or a system, sige sabihin na lang natin system, in building a system, kailangan mong ipaintindi muna sa customer kung ano yung mga details or yung mga features na ilalagay mo later on. Kasi hindi naman ganyan ka-well-versed yung mga customer natin, lalo na pag oldies na yung mga customer or yung age nila ay hindi na gaya ng age natin na very equipped na tayo sa technology. So, we need this SRS report para makita nila, ito pala yung mga requirements na pwede ring mailagay sa system ko or dun sa software na pinagawa ko para mas maganda. And i-explain din natin yan, sabi niya, detailed specification. I-explain mo in detail yung mga specifications doon sa requirements na yan para hindi tayo magka-problema later on. Hindi yung mag-create ka lang ng system, ito yung magiging feature ng mga system mo, maging okay na yan, nang hindi mo ina-explain yan sa customer. That is the first problem pag nag-create ng system, especially sa mga students namin. Ayan, yung mga nagde-defend sa kanilang mga system pag sila na ay 4th year, isa sa pinaka-importanteng tanong ng ating panelists ay, nag-conduct ka ba ng data gathering? Nagtanong ka ba doon sa owner mismo? Ito ba talaga yung kailangan nila? Yun yung mga tanong na kailangan na tanungin sa mga students pag nagpapa-defend na kami ng kanilang system, ng kanilang thesis, ng kanilang capstone. So, yun yung pinaka-importanteng tanong kasi doon magsisimula ang lahat. Doon sa pag-gather ng requirements. Kasi hindi mo makukuha or hindi mo magagawa lahat ng mga features or hindi ka makakreate ng iyong output nang hindi mo muna tinatanong kung ano yung mga requirements. Hindi pala kailangan yung nilagay mo, inilagay mo na sa system mo. Or, pinakomplikado niya lang yung system mo, nilagay mo yung feature na yun sa system mo at hindi nagamit ng customer yung system kasi doon sa mga features na nilalagay mo na hindi naman kasali doon sa requirements, specifications niya. So, that will be the problem later on. So, ngayon pa lang, sinasabihan ko na kayo, you need to know first the requirement bago kayo mag-create ng system. Yun ang magiging basis mo, yun yung magiging parang blueprint mo na susundan mo yung mga features na yon para magamit nila, hindi yung gumagawa ka dahil gusto mo or hindi naglalagay ka ng feature dahil yun ang gusto mo, hindi po. That is a two-way process, no? So, that is for the first paragraph. So, sabi niya, the SRS is a specification for a specific software product. Lagi itong lumalabas, no, specification. Gaya ng pagbili mo ng cellphone, kailangan mo munang malaman lahat ng mga specification niya. Kasi baka mamaya, low pala yung, maganda yung itsura ng phone, pero hindi mo chinek yung specification, mababa pala yung specs niya, kasi yung shortcut term ng specification ay specs. Mababa pala yung specification ng phone, pero ang ganda ng outer layer niya, ang ganda ng user interface niya, ang ganda ng design niya. Pero nung pumunta na tayo doon sa specs niya, hindi pala siya ganun kaganda. So, we also need sa pag-create ng system, we need this SRS. It is a specification for a specific software product, a program or set of applications that perform particular functions in a specific environment. Ayan. Napakaganda ng definition niya, no? It is a specification for a specific product, program or set of applications. Tatlo yung nilagay niyang example dito. Pwede daw na software product kasi we also need to understand that a software has different categories. Ayan, ano ba yung mga tatlong categories ng software natin? Nandyan yung application software, utility software, at saka system software. A quick review lang, no? Doon sa mga categories ng ating software. So, pag sinabi nating application software, yun yung mga application or apps na ginagamit natin. Just like Microsoft Word, ano pa, yung mga games natin, yung photo editing, mga ganyan. That is application software. Sa ating phone, pwede rin po. No, kahit Android man yan or iOS, we also make use of apps. These apps, meron silang mga specific na task na ginagawa. Ayan, so sabi niya, meron ding specification. So, for example, yung ano natin, yung Photoshop, ano ba yung mga specification or yung gamit ng specific software na yon or application software na yon, nag-edit ng photo, di ba? Yun yung mga specifications niya. And then, eto pa, programs. Ayan, kahit nagpo-program tayo, kahit simple program, meron pa ding specification yan. Okay, ituloy ko lang yung yung category and then yung utility software. Ayan. Ano ba yung mga utility software natin? Yun yung mga antiviruses natin, yung mga yon. And then we also have the system software. Ito na yung mga operating system natin na hindi natin magagamit yung computer without installing first the operating system. Okay, yun yung mga software products natin. Dito naman tayo sa program, ayun yung mga ginagawa yung mga programs, kasi itong mga programs na to, these are list of instructions na merong ginagawa sa ating mga computer. So, for example, itong pag-move ko lang ng cursor or ng pointer ng mouse ko, there is a specific program for that job or particular task. So, same din sa software, pero itong program or itong software kasi is the combination of all the programs. Itong program kasi is list of instructions. So, for example, minove ko yung cursor ko pa left, ayan, merong specific program para dyan. Ayan, or set of applications. Ito yung diniscuss ko kanina, applications. It may be applications sa ating laptop or applications sa ating mga phones. Ayan, there is a particular specification for those, okay, that perform particular functions in a specific environment. So it serves several goals depending on who is writing it. So for your case, as a student, I know that you are not that well equipped in creating this SRS. So I will just make it simpler. No, I will just explain ko ano ba yung mga content dito para may ma-experience rin kung paano nga ang paggawa ng SRS document or ng report. Okay, so sabi niya dito, first, the SRS could be written by the client of a system. Second, the SRS could be written by a developer of the system. So, let's take into context this one, no? Ang SRS daw is pwedeng isulat yan ng client natin. Yan. Highlight lang. Client and also the developer. So, this is a two-way process, no? Ang pinaka-importante, gaya ng sabi ko kanina, ang pinaka-importante talaga na kailangan mong makausap is the client or the customer mismo. Next is the developer. Dapat there is a communication between the client and the developer later on para mas maganda yung output, para may pagkakaintindihan. Kasi kung client lang naman yung pina-follow mo, may time kasi or may tendency kasi na hindi niya masabi yung mga other na mga features, kaya nandyan yung developer para ipaintindi niya rin yung mga different features na kailangan sa kanyang system. So, the two methods create entirely various situations and establish different purpose for the document altogether. So, the first case, SRS is used to define the needs. Ayan. Highlight ko ulit, the first case daw ng SRS natin. It is used to define the needs and expectations of the users. Hindi lang po yung mga requirements na galing sa users ang importante dyan. Nag-e-expect din yung users natin, yung customers natin, or yung client natin na maganda yung magiging kalalabasan. That's why I said that is a two-way process. Two-way process between a client and a developer. They must work together para maganda yung expectation or maganda yung or ma-meet yung expectations ng ating users. So that is the first case for our SRS. The second one is SRS is written for various purposes and serves as the contract document between customer and developer. Especially po, pag naging programmer na kayo in the near future, you need a document or a contract wherein that will be your basis later on, no? Na ito po yung mga pinagawa mo, finalo ko po yung pinagawa ninyo, ayan. So, minsan kasi, or most of the times, ayan, merong money na involved, at least meron po tayong document na maipapakita sa ating client para that will be our basis para sa transactions later on. So, those are the two cases, no, of the SRS. So, now that we know the basics of the SRS or the software requirements specification, let us now define what is a system requirement. Although na-explain ko na siya kanina, yung iba, at least let us know first kung ano ba ito yung tinatawag na system requirements. So, system requirements, these are descriptions of what the system should do. That is the simplest description or the most self-explanatory part ng definition ng system requirements. It is the description of what the system should do and the services that it provides and the constraints on its operations. Itong constraints na sinasabi po dito, these are specifications or yung mga features niya. So, for example, sa database, meron tayong mga different constraints. For example, yung data type niya dapat ay string, varchar, yung mga ganun. Ganun yung mga examples niya. Okay, so that is the first definition of system requirements, which is also self-explanatory. The second one is reflect the needs of customers for a system that serves a certain purpose such as controlling a device, placing an order, or finding information. That is a very good also na definition ng ating system requirements. Sabi niya, reflect the needs of the customers. This also this supports yung sinabi ko kanina na the system or the customer is always right because yung mga requirements na kailangan ng ating customer, sinasabi niya yan, no, para maging basis natin doon sa final output natin. So, nire-reflect pala ng system requirements yung mga needs at wants also, no, hindi lang needs yan, pati wants din ng ating customers para sa system niya. Para doon sa purpose na kailangan para sa kanyang business. So, for example, yung purpose ng pinagawa niyang system ay magko-control ka lang ng isang particular device or kailangan dun sa system makapag-place ka ng order or dun sa system mabilis ko lang mahanap yung mga information na kailangan ko. Yun yung mga requirements na or sample requirements na na pwedeng ipagawa sa ating mga developers na nasasabi din ng mga customer ng mga requirements. So, ito yung sinasabi nating system requirements. Okay, so next naman is requirements engineering. Ano naman tong sinasabing requirements engineering? Sa first na sinabi ko kanina, our topic or our subject is somewhat the same with the software engineering. So, ano naman tong sinasabi? Kung merong system requirements, ano naman tong sinasabi niyang requirements engineering? Okay, so yung first definition niya, sabi niya, it is the process. Ayan, let's take into context yung word na process. So, when we say process, there is a procedure, no? A procedure in doing something. Sabi niya, process of finding out. Ito, number 1, process of finding out. And then, analyzing. Number 2. Number 3, documenting. And 4, checking these services and constraints. So, para pala mahanap natin or malaman natin itong mga system requirements na ito, kailangan natin ng requirements engineering. Meron tayong 4 na process. Ayan, sabi niya process or there is a procedure na kailangan nating i-follow, no? So, for example, number 1, finding out. Ayan, the process of finding out. Number 2, analyzing. Number 3, documenting. And then number 4, checking these services and particular constraints. So, hindi pala tayo dapat atake ng atake. Meron din pala tayong tinatawag na requirements engineering or yung process na kailangan nating i-follow para makuha natin itong mga system requirements na yan. So, hindi lang yung pag sinabi ng customer, ito yung mga requirements ko, hindi pala doon matatapos. Kailangan pala natin siyang i-analyze, kailangan natin i-document, kailangan natin i-check lahat-lahat ng mga yon. Okay, the second one, it is a broad spectrum of tasks and techniques that lead to an understanding of requirements. Ayan, we have the word understanding. Ayan, it is always important to understand these requirements. Paano mo masusolusyonan ang isang problema kung hindi mo maintindihan mismo yung mga problem na yun? Paano mo malalaman yung paano ka makaka-come up ng isang solution kung doon sa first step pa lang ay hindi mo na nagawa ng maayos yung trabaho mo? Ayan, so we need to understand first this requirement. Sabi niya, it is a broad spectrum of tasks. Pag sinabi nating broad kasi meaning malawak, hindi lang yan specific, no? That is broad, malawak po yung sakop ng requirements engineering. So, ang akala mo na kuha mo na lahat ng mga requirements, yun pala, hindi, no? Marami pa pala tayong pwedeng i-add doon. Marami pa palang mga things na kailangan nating i-add. So, you need to understand also na there is no perfect system. There is always a system na, of course, na gagawa yung mga specific na job or nasa-serve na yung purpose niya. Pero, we also have to understand that there is no perfect system. Meron at merong mga features na kailangang i-add, merong kulang, may sobra. Pero, it is more important to know these system requirements first para hindi siya ganon ka yung system na i-create natin later on, hindi siya ganun ka useless, no? So, we need this requirements engineering. And lastly, sabi niya, major software engineering action that begins during the communication activity and continues into the modeling activity. The communication activity is one of the most important because this will be the start of everything. Na yung communication ng developer, ng software engineer, lahat-lahat yan into the customer. So, yung communication kasi it's very important. What if, for example na I will give a scenario. What if I am a Korean and you are a Filipino, and then I don't know Tagalog and you don't know Hangul or yung Korean language. So what if we communicate with each other? No? I talk to you and you talk to me in different language. So there is a communication barrier, meaning meron tayong hindi tayo magkakaintindihan kasi magkaiba tayo ng language, magkaiba tayo ng language na ginagamit, iba yung tinatahak ng communication or iba yung tinatahak ng pag-uusap natin kasi hindi nga natin maintindihan ng isa't isa. Walang particular or wala yung meeting point kasi magkaiba tayo ng language. So, ang mangyayari, meron isang interpreter para magkaintindihan tayo, no? Para magkaroon tayo ng particular goal, ma-meet natin yung goal natin na pag-uusap. Ganun din po dito, no? Dun sa first step, which is a communication activity, kailangan maintindihan or magkaintindihan ang isa't isa para makapag-proceed ka doon sa next na activity, which is the modeling activity. And modeling activity is just like coding or magde-design ka ng system mo, just like that. Ayan. Bago ka makarating sa activity na yan, dito ka muna sa may communication activity. Sabi niya, begins during communication activity. Doon po nag-i-start ang action ng software engineering. Okay? Next naman is, ito, who are the participants in the requirements engineering? Sino kaya yung mga involved dyan? Ayan, development team, of course, that is also equally important with the customer. Sabi niya, particularly the software engineer, the system analyst, project manager, and the programmer. So, for example, no, 4th year na kayo at nag-create kayo ng capstone ninyo, merong mga tao dyan na mag-a-act ng software engineer, system analyst, project manager, or a programmer. Ayan. So, ang tawag po sa inyo is the development team. Doon na kayo sa technical part. Kayo yung magtra-translate ng mga requirements na galing sa client into a something na nakikita na nila doon sa or yun na yung nakikita mismo or yung end yung output na ninyo or yung output na i-take over mo later on sa customer. Sila po yung gagawa, the development team. And of course, they are also equally important itong mga project stakeholders natin. So for example, nandiyan yung manager, yung customer, at saka yung end users. So yung manager dito, siya yung kakausapin ninyo. Siya yung magmamanage. For example, sa isang restaurant, meron tayong manager kasi siya yung magmamanage ng operation ng ating restaurant. Ayan, siya yung magmamanage sa mga crew, sa mga tao na nasa paligid niya. Ayan. And then, sa isang restaurant, meron tayong customer. Sila naman yung mga tao na pagkukunan mo ng income kasi without the customer, hindi mag-function or hindi mag-ooperate yung business na yon. And then lastly, we also have the end users. Ayan, sila yung gagamit sa system mo mismo. So, for example, sa isang restaurant, nagpagawa si manager ng isang system at para mas mapabilis yung process ng pag-cater ng customer, kakailanganin mo yung system na yon at merong isang magmamanage sa system na yon. Ayan yung mga end users natin. So, sila po yung mga participants in the requirement engineering. Yung pagkuha ng requirement, hindi lang po mag-i-stay or hindi lang po limited kay manager. Kailangan din po para sa customers kasi nga sila yung parang yung comfort later on nung particular system na yon, sila yung mabe-benefit other than the managers or the business per se. And then lastly, of course, yung end user mo, yung gagamit ng system mo later on. So they are all important in the requirements engineering, the development team, and then the project stakeholders. Stakeholders kasi ang tawag po natin doon sa mga tao na involved sa isang organization. Okay? Ayan. So we have here, we just have to differentiate ano nga ba ang system requirements at saka user requirements. Ayan. So user requirements these are statements in natural language plus diagrams of what services the system is expected to provide to system users and the constraints under which it must operate. Dito naman tayo sa system requirements. These are more detailed descriptions of the software system's functions, services, and operational constraints. It defines exactly what is to be implemented and may be part of the contract. Ayan. So that is the difference, no? To coin it, to simply explain it, these are just yung user requirements. Yan po yung mga, sabi niya, ayan, statements in natural language, or the diagrams of what services the system is expected to provide. Ayan, yung mga, yung mga expectations ng mga customer, kung ano ba yung mga gagawin ng system na yan. Dito naman sa system requirements, yan yung detailed na information or description ng mga requirements na kakailanganin ng software na yan. These are just like expectations. Yan, na-expect ko na ganito ang gagawin ng system na yan, ganito, ganyan. Ayan yung user requirements. Pag dito naman sa system requirements, in detailed form na siya para mas maganda or mas mabilis siyang maintindihan. Okay? So, yan yung difference ng dalawa. Okay, so now let's proceed to the system requirements classification. Meron po tayong dalawa. Kailangan nyo pong malaman ang difference nitong dalawa kasi itong dalawang to ilalagay natin sa ilalagay ko or include ko doon sa activity nyo later on. So, let's start with the functional requirements. Ayan. We have to know the functional requirements and non-functional requirements. Okay, so when we say functional requirements, it describes what the system should do. Very self-explanatory. Dinedescribe niya lang daw kung ano ang gagawin ng system na yan. Then, yan, statements of services the system should provide, how the system should read or sige, ayan na lang natin, minimize lang natin, or react, yan. So, it's statements of services that the system should provide. Ayan. Very self-explanatory. Ano kayang maipro-provide ng ating system? And then, ano kaya ang reaksyon ng system or ano ang magiging reaction ng system pag naglagay tayo ng input at paano magbe-behave yung ating system. So, ulitin ko lang, basahin ko lang, statements of services the system should provide, how the system should react to inputs, and how the system should behave. O, yan parang mga expectations natin. And then the third one, depend on the type of software being developed. Ayan, I already explained to you the different categories of a system. Pero sa case natin, yung system na pwede nating, or yung type ng system or yung software na i-develop natin, for example, is standalone, ayan, LAN-based, and we also have online system. Ayan. Yun yung mga different systems na pwede nating gawin. And kaya sabi niya dito, depend on the type of software being developed. So, the expected users of the software, ayan, depende rin po sa mga gagamit ng ating software. So, for example, ang gagamit sa ating software na i-develop ay yung manager or yung in charge sa isang business, or meron din yung mga gagamit sa software na students. Ayan, yung mga depende yan sa kung ano yung mga expected users natin and the general approach taken by the organization when writing requirements. Ayan. Okay, so what are these or what are the examples of functional requirements? Okay, so these are some examples or simple examples of the functional requirements. So, for example, number 1, Ito yung first na requirement dapat ng system. A user shall be able to add new items. Ayan. So, napaka-typical na feature ng ating or a requirement ng ating system na yung user daw dapat ay makakapag-add siya ng item. O another example, yung user daw dapat ay makakapag-edit ng item, makakapag-remove ng item, makakapag-replace ng item, or makakapag-delete ng item. Yun yung mga example ng ating functional requirements. Yung requirement mismo na kailangan magawa ng system na i-create. So, yun yung simple examples. Number 2, ito, so for example, ulit, meron tayong functional requirement number 2. The system can monitor inventory any moment of the day. So, meaning, na monitor niya daw periodically yung report natin. Yan yung inventory. So, for example, yung system natin is a sales and inventory system. So, every day daw dapat na monitor niya or any day and every day and any moment, kahit anong oras daw, dapat na monitor ng system natin yung inventory or yung stocks ng ating for example, ng isang store. Ayan. Sa isang store, dapat daw na monitor ng system yung inventory. Pag sinabi kasi nating inventory, yun yung mga stocks natin. Stocks ng or yung mga products na ini-stock natin sa ating business. Ayan, sa ating store. O, dapat daw yung system na monitor niya yung inventory niya kahit anong oras sa isang araw. Another example, yan, to support yung second na feature, dapat yung system na monitor niya yung inventory report, ayan, or nakakapag-produce ng inventory report daily, weekly, monthly, at saka yearly or annually. Yun yung mga magagandang feature or functional requirements ng isang system. Ayan. So, what I'm giving you na mga functional requirements, these are simple functional requirements na pwede nyong tularan later on pag kayo naman yung mag-create ng mga functional requirements na to. Okay, third one, ayan, example. The cashier can print a receipt to be provided to the customer. Yan, typical na feature yan or functional na feature ng isang system. So, dapat daw yung cashier makakapag-print siya ng isang receipt na ibibigay sa customer. So, that is an example sa ating functional requirements. Or, another example ng functional requirement na merong printing. So, dapat daw yung manager makakapag-print siya ng sales report for a day, weekly, monthly, and annually. Ayan. Isa yun yung mga feature ng mga isa yan ng mga functional requirements. Sige, ilagay natin dito para mas paano natin. Ito, dito sa first kanina, sabi ko, the user shall be able to edit, ayan, ihalo na lang natin lahat. Edit, remove, and replace, sige sabihin natin, replace new items. Magandang example yan. Okay, dito naman sa pangalawa, sabi natin, ayan, the system can monitor sales and inventory any moment, or inventory weekly or daily, weekly, monthly, and annually or yearly, pwede lang din. Okay, dito naman sa pangatlo, the cashier can print, ayan, pwede rin the manager can print in sales and inventory report. O, ilagay na naman natin ito, daily, weekly, and annually. Ayan. So, these are a very good example of functional requirements. Ayan. And then, the last one, the fourth one. The system shall print a summary of sales at the end of the day. So, this is also a The same with this one. Ayan. Pareho lang sila. So, depende na later on kung paano nyo siya ilalagay. So, based on doon sa nilagay ko, ito kasi nilagay niya dito sa pang-apat na example is print a summary of sales lang. So, ang nilagay ko kasi dito sa taas is dalawa. Print sales and inventory report. Ayan. So, maganda itong number 4 kasi naglagay siya ng word na summary of sales. At the end of the day, okay, pwedeng weekly din. Pareho nung nandito na part. Ayan, kahit ilagay nyo na lang later on, weekly, monthly, and annually. So, those are examples, no? Very simple examples of functional requirements. Ito po yung sinasabi na or tinatawag nating functional requirements. Next naman is the non-functional requirements. Ano naman to kaya? Ano naman kaya ang diferensya doon sa nauna? So, sabi niya, not directly concerned with the specific services delivered by the system to its user. Ano din ito? So, maybe constraints on the services or functions offered by the system. So, timing constraints, constraints on the development process, and constraints imposed by standard often apply to the system as a whole rather than individual system features or services. So, system properties such as, for example, daw ito, reliability, response time, and store occupancy. Ito po yung mga para mas maintindihan po natin, itong mga non-functional requirements po, ito po yung mga examples niya. Ayan. So, for example, ayan, meron tayong category dito. Technical, performance, usability, at saka security, and many others. So, itong apat yung mga non-functional requirements. Nakakategorize po siya para mas maintindihan natin kung ano ba itong sinasabi na non-functional requirement na ito. Ano bang pagkakaiba doon sa naunang example. So, let's start with the technical part. So, yung technical part is under environment, hardware, at saka software. So, ang non-functional requirements, by merely looking at the different categories, these are parang yung mga specifications or yung nagagawa mismo ng system or nung hardware or nung software mismo. No? It's very simple to identify kasi sabi niya at first dito sa technical, ayan, ito yung nilagay niyang hardware requirements. Dapat daw yung desktop computer na gagamitin natin para sa ating system ay merong 4 GB na memory. Ayan. So, ulitin ko lang, ang non-functional requirements are also equally important with the functional requirements. Ayan. So, yun yung first category na technical natin. So, desktop computers must have 4 GB memory. Or, another one, yung RAM dapat daw ng ano natin, na RAM of the laptop or the desktop computer. Sige, lagay na lang natin. Desktop computer must have 8 GB. Ayan, 8 GB. Ayan. So, ito po yung mga example ng ating non-functional requirements. If we try to compare it here on functional requirements, in-specify niya kasi dito sa functional requirements kung ano yung magagawa mismo ng ating system. Dito sa non-functional naman, these are just the features or the specifications na kailangan natin para mag-function yung system natin later on ng mas maayos. Okay, I hope it is clear. Okay, next one, performance, measure of workloads. So, for example daw, the client computer must have 0.10 seconds response time on screen. So, pag sinabi nating response time, ito, pag minove ko itong cursor ko, ayan, dapat daw mabilis lang yung speed niya. Yun po yung mga non-functional requirements natin, no? Kung iisipin natin, hindi na natin kailangan itong non-functional requirements na ito kasi automatically naman malalaman natin yan or alangan ma-measure mo pa itong mga response time ng ating screen. Hindi po. They are also equally important. Kailangan natin malaman lahat ito kasi yung customer mismo ang bibili sa mga products na ito or yung customer mismo later on ang magbibigay ng pera para ma-meet yung mga requirements na ito or yung mga specifications, lalo na pag bibili tayo ng unit para doon sa system. So, pag nagre-create kasi tayo ng system, depende yan kung ano yung specifications ng laptop or ng computer na pag-i-installan niya later on. Kasi meron tayong tinatawag na compatibility issue. hindi po compatible yung system doon sa hardware requirements. So, kailangan natin ng non-functional requirements. Okay, next is usability. Ayan, user interface, related work procedures, online help, or documentation. So, for example, yung use the organization's color in the interface. So, yung usability, just like the user interface, for example, sa ating department, ang color ng IT department is color orange. Ayan. So, at sila yung nagpagawa ng system. So, it is not good naman na gagamitin mo yung yellow-green na kulay sa system mo. Ang system ng or ang color ng system mo or yung user interface or yung design ng system mo ay apple green. Ang nagpagawa ng ating system ay orange ay yung organizational color nila. So, hindi siya applicable, no, yung design. Kahit pala yung mga things na yan, yung mga bagay na yan, dapat din natin tinitignan. So, that is the usability non-functional requirement. So, you also need to know what color or what applicable color yung ilalagay mo sa system mo later on. So, sa case ng IT, dapat orange. O kung agriculture man yan, green. Kung criminology, maroon. Kung whole CSUP at color blue or light blue or royal blue. So, yan yung mga things na kailangan malaman natin. So, that is under the usability. Next one is security. Ayan. So, sabi niya, access of users to the system. So, sabi niya dito sa example, users will only do sales transaction. Kaya nga, doon sa documentation natin, meron tayong scope and delimitation. Pag sinabi natin scope and delimitation, kung ano lang ang ginagawa ng system, yun lang po ang iprepresent natin. Ayan, kasi meron yung mga iba magtatanong, ano ba yung mga magagawa ng system ninyo? Pag nag-defend kayo later on sa panelist, yan, pag nag-defend kayo ng thesis ninyo, merong feature na sinasabi yung panelist na hindi naman feature ng system. Doon na papasok yung scope and delimitation, wherein sasabihin nyo lang kung ano lang yung ginagawa ng system ninyo. Mag-stick lang kayo doon sa part na yon. So, for example, the system will only print the records or the sales and inventory records. The system will only focus on the implementation of the sales and inventory system or in the development of the sales and inventory system. Doon lang kayo mag-focus. Kasi, may time kasi na yung mga panelists later on, tatanungin kayo, may feature pa na ganito, may feature na ganyan, dapat ilagay nyo to, dapat ilagay nyo ganyan. So, mag-stand firm kayo na ito lang yung limitation or ito lang yung scope ng inyong system. So, same din dito sa non-functional system or non-functional requirements. Sabi niya, user will only do sales transaction. Nothing more, nothing less. So, yun yung mga typical na example. So, we can also add later on. For example, sa maintenance, ayan, naglagay tayo, maintainability. Ayan, sa maintenance, maintainability. Sa maintainability ng system. So, the developer will be the one to update or upgrade the system. Ayan, pwede rin natin yung ilagay later on sa maintainability ng ating system or dun sa maintainability na non-functional requirement. We can also search for different non-functional requirements if we like. There are other categories na pwede nating i-add dito. Just keep in mind that these are the non-functional requirements. Examples are the specifications that you need for the computer na pag-i-installan mo ng system, yung user interface, ayan, meron din pala dito sa usability documentation. Doon sa steps in programming process, I always say this, that documentation is not requirement. It is not mandatory, no? It is optional. Doon sa step in programming process, pero mas maganda na maglagay tayo ng documentation doon sa system na i-implement natin later on para yung customer later on, pag may magka-problema siya, at least merong documentation kung saan pwede niya tignan yung problema na yon. Same as through with this online help. Yun yung mga other things na kailangan natin consider na non-functional requirements dito sa under ng usability. Pwede nyo ilagay later dito. Ayan. And for example, no, online help. Ayan, online help, the client will be able to access an online help feature of the system. Ayan. So that is also an example of a usability non-functional requirements. So those are the differences of non-functional and functional requirements. So I will be giving you an activity later on that is also the same with this one. So I hope you understood. I hope you categorize the two following requirements, no, of SRS. Okay, so now let's proceed. Ayan. So now let's proceed with the different characteristics of good SRS. So following are the features of a good SRS document. Nasa SRS document na po tayo. Ayan. Meron tayong illustration dito kung saan nakapaloob or nasa paligid niya yung mga different characteristics of a good SRS document. Ayan, nandiyan yung correctness, completeness, consistency, unambiguousness, ranking for importance. Ayan, nandyan po siya. So, they are all equally important characteristics kasi nga sabi niya, good SRS. So, isa-isahin po natin itong mga characteristics na ito. I will just explain it briefly. So, number 1, correctness. Ayan, sabi niya, user review is used to provide the accuracy of requirements stated in the SRS. SRS is said to be perfect if it's covered. I-highlight natin to. It is said to be perfect if it covers all the needs. Yan, covers all the needs that are truly expected from the system. Ayan. In order to have a good SRS document, dapat daw there is a correctness. Wherein, para maging perfect po yung SRS natin, dapat kino-cover niya lahat ng mga needs and also the wants, no? Or yung mga expectations ng customer doon sa system mo. So, dapat nandun lahat in detailed form. Okay? Number 2, para maging maganda yung SRS natin, kailangan merong completeness. Ayan, the SRS is complete. So, it, sinusupport niya yung first one na correctness. Dapat correct yung mga nilalagay natin, no? Hindi lang tayo maglalagay kasi kailangan natin or hindi lang tayo maglalagay ng mga requirements or nung mga needs kasi yun yung gusto natin, hindi yun yung gusto ng ating client. So, dapat hindi po ganun. Dapat, kung ano yung gusto rin ng client, yun din po ang nilalagay. Ay, dapat correct din po yung mga nilalagay natin na needs nila. And then, dapat kompleto. Walang labis, walang kulang. Sabi niya, number 1, all essential requirements, whether relating to functionality, performance, design constraints, attributes, or external interfaces. So, regardless yan kung functional or non-functional requirements, dapat kompleto. Dapat nilalagay lahat. Dapat we take it into consideration. We give equal importance to those requirements. Number 2, definition of the responses of the software to all realizable classes of input data in all available categories of situations. And number 3, full labels and references to all figures, tables, and diagrams in the SRS, and definitions of all terms and units of measures. So, dapat kompleto po lahat yan. Nakalista lahat yung mga responses ng software. So, kung clinic ko ito, ano ang nangyari? Dapat kompleto po lahat yan. Naka-document po lahat yan. Dapat kompleto. Number 3, sabi niya, full labels and references to all figures, especially po if we are working with figures and tables and diagrams. Dapat kompleto yung mga labels niyan kasi hindi natin maintindihan kung walang label. Kasi ginagamit natin ang label for us to know for what, kung para saan yung thing niya yan, para saan yung diagram na yan, para saan yung figure na yan. Ayan. So, kailangan natin ng label at saka references. Ayan. And definitions of all terms and units of measure. We also need to understand na hindi po lahat ng mga users ay well-equipped when it comes to the definitions or computer terms, mga ganyan. So, kailangan din natin ng a complete na definition of terms, ayan, at saka yung units of measure. So, that is under completeness. Number 3, consistency. Ano bang ibig sabihin ng consistent? No, dapat hindi yan, for example, no, sa isang level. Ayan, sa isang level, dapat pare-parehong na-under sila ng 5. So, for example, yung height ng bar graph, dapat naka 5 lang yan. Hindi yung 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, increasing or decreasing. Hindi po. Dapat merong consistency. So, the SRS is consistent if and only if no subset of individual requirements described in its conflict. So, there are 3 types of possible conflict para mas maintindihan natin itong sinasabi na consistency. Number 1 na conflict daw, the specified characteristics of real-world objects may conflicts. So, for example daw, yung format of an output report may be described in one requirement as tabular, but in another as textual. So, dapat daw, pag nag-recreate tayo ng report, uniform po yung ginagamit natin. For example, in table form daw yung isa, tapos yung isa in tinype mo through textual. Or for example, ayan, gumamit tayo ng bar graph. Yung isa na ginamit mo, pie graph. So, dapat daw po consistent tayo. Kung ano yung ginamit mo sa isa, yun lang din yung gagamitin mo sa isa para hindi ma-confuse later on yung gagamit. Or hindi ma-confuse later on yung mag-i-interpret nung data natin or nung report natin. Okay, so number 2 or letter B, one condition may state that all lights shall be green with another states that all lights shall be blue. Ayan, color-coded things naman ito. Sa color naman, so for example, sa user interface, no? Kailangan merong consistency sa pag-design ng ating system. For example, sa first na window, color red ang ginamit mo. Tapos sa next na window naman, color yellow. And then the third window, color blue. So, dapat in uniform tayo. Gaya nung sinabi ko sa non-functional requirement, under ng design, kailangan i-consider din natin kung ano yung masasabi or yung needs or yung talagang naka-inline na theme ng or yung color talaga na ginagamit ng ating client. Ayan, para hindi po tayo magkaroon ng problema later on. And number 2, na possible na conflict niya or magiging conflict natin sa SRS, there may be a reasonable or temporal conflict between 2 specified actions. For example daw, para mas maintindihan natin, one requirement may determine that the program will add 2 inputs and another may determine that the program will multiply them. So, there is also a clear understanding of what must be the process na gagawin ng ating system kasi magko-conflict. For example daw ito, I'll just explain this one. So, one requirement determine that the program will add 2 inputs. Ito po yung sinasabi niya, no, mag-a-add lang daw ng 2 inputs. Yun yung una na requirement. Pero, yung iba, yung nalagay na requirement is hindi siya mag-a-add, imumultiply siya. So, there is a conflict to that particular part. So, dito sa letter B, one condition may state that A must follow or must always follow B, while other requirements that A and B co-occurs. Ayan. So, eto lang yung mga example para mas maintindihan natin itong number 2 dito na there may be a reasonable or temporal conflict between 2 specified actions. Yung mga ginagawa mismo ng ating system yan, yung sinasabi niya dito. So, sabi niya doon sa una, baka yung isang process na or yung program natin, ang gagawin niya dapat ay mag-add siya ng 2 inputs. Pero ang nangyari, nag-multiply sila. That will be a conflict. Yung isa pa, yung for example, itong set A, dapat i-follow niya tong set B lagi. Ang nangyari, nagsabay silang 2. Ayan. So, that is another example. So, one condition may state that A must always follow B. So, A, B. Ganun sana. A, B, C. Hindi po. Ang nangyari is, nagsabay sila. Nag-co-occur sila. And number 3, two or more requirements may define the same real-world object but use different terms for that object. For example, a program's request for user input may be called a prompt. Ayan. So, ito po yung term natin. Prompt daw. Ang prompt po ay yung program's request for user input. Ayan. In one requirements and a queue in another queue. So, the use of standard terminology and description promotes consistency. So, dapat consistent din po tayo sa paglagay ng ating mga terms. So, for example daw ay itong isa. Ang ginamit niya ay prompt, pero yung isa, ang ginamit niya ay queue. So, which is which? Hindi, meron tayong confusion pag ganito yung ginamit natin. So, there must be a consistency. So, yung, for example, ako, nagdi-discuss ako, ang ginagamit kong term ay activity. Pero, pinalitan ko ng assignment yung on the latter part of my explanation. Ayan. So, there is a confusion for you. So, you are going to create an activity. Yun yung sinasabi ko. Tapos, bigla kong pinalitan yung activity ng assignment. So, mako-confuse kayo. Ano nga ba? Activity nga ba, ma'am? Or assignment yung papagawa mo? So, that is the explanation for number 3. So, you need to be consistent on your terminologies later on. Okay, number 4 naman is unambiguousness. Ayan, sabi niya, SRS is unambiguous when every fixed requirement has only one interpretation. This suggests that each element is uniquely interpreted. In case there is a method used with multiple definitions, the requirement report should be determine the implications in the SRS so that it is clear and simple to understand. So, let us see, para mas maintindihan natin ito, let us see, ano nga ba yung similar na word na pwedeng i-ano natin. Ayan. So, unambiguous or unmistakable, clear-cut, explicit, definite, decided, or clear. Ayan, mas maganda yung term natin na clear. So, dapat daw, it is clear when our SRS is clear when every fixed requirement has only one interpretation. So, gaya dito sa example natin kanina na dapat consistent tayo, there is also a need na yung SRS natin is clear. Ayan. Especially pag nag-i-interpret tayo ng ating requirement. Hindi yung magbibigay ka ng requirement na very complicated in nature, kaya hindi maintindihan na yan ng ating developer or ng mga stakeholders natin. So, there must be an unambiguousness. Okay? Number 5, ranking for importance and stability. So, the SRS is ranked for importance and stability if each requirement in it has an identifier to indicate either the significance or stability of that particular requirement. So, typically, all requirements are not equally important. So, let us also take into context this one. All requirements are not equally important. Kaya nirarank natin. Kaya ito, sabi niya, ranking for importance and stability. Nirarank natin kung ano yung pinaka-importante sa hindi na requirements. Ano yung uunahin mo muna bago yung pinakahuli. Ano yung pinakamadali sa pinakamahirap or ano yung pinakamahirap sa pinakamadali. Kailangan natin yung i-rank kasi hindi mo maatake ng sabay-sabay yung mga requirements na yan. Hindi mo ma-accomplish lahat ng mga requirements na yan ng isang bagsakan. So, dapat nakasort po siya or naka-filter po siya. Kasi kailangan nating intindihin na hindi lahat ng mga requirements na yan ay equally important sa isa't isa. So, for example, ano mas importante? Yung functionality ba ng system na makakapag-add siya ng new item or yung dapat yung button niya dapat ay naka-change ng color blue, naka-change ng color red, yung mga ganon. Dapat uniform ang buttons. So, which is most important? So, mas maimportante po yung functionality kung saan makakapag-add yung system ng new items kesa doon sa color ng button natin mismo. So, yun yung pinaka-typical na example dito sa ranking. So, unahin mo muna yung functionality at huliin mo na yung color ng button mo later on. So, some prerequisites may be essential, especially for life-critical applications. Ayan. While others may be desirable. So, each element should be identified to make these differences clear and explicit. So, another way to rank requirements is to distinguish classes of items as essential, conditional, and optional. Okay, next naman, number 6 is modifiability. So, SRS should be made as modifiable as likely and should be capable of quickly obtain changes to the system to some extent. Modification should be perfectly indexed and cross-reference. So, pag sinabi kasi nating modifiable, no, it must be flexible. So, kung merong mang change na nangyayari or merong mang change na gustong ipagawa sa inyo, dapat flexible yan. Dapat quick lang or mabilis mo lang siyang magagrasp. Mabilis mo lang siyang i-obtain yung change niya or mabilis mo lang siyang palitan. So, that is modifiability. Ganun dapat yung SRS natin. It should be perfectly indexed and cross-reference. And then, number 7, verifiability. SRS is correct when the specified requirements can be verified with a cost-effective system to check whether the final software meets those requirements. So, the requirements are verified with the help of reviews. So, you need also a verifications from the different stakeholders that are involved in SRS. No? Bago ka mag-take into action or bago mo i-specify yung requirement na yon na i-apply mo dapat i-verify mo muna kung cost-effective ba. Okay? So, that is verifiable. And number 8, traceability. Ayan, the SRS is traceable if the origin of each of the requirements is clear and if it facilitates the referencing of each one condition in future development or enhancement documentation. So, meron tayong dalawang type, no, ng traceability. Number 1, background traceability. So, this depends upon each requirement explicitly referencing its source in earlier documents. And number 2 is forward traceability, which I'm not going to expand the explanation with this one with these two types of traceability. I will just read it. So, this depends upon each element in the SRS having a unique name or reference number. So, the forward traceability of the SRS is especially crucial when the software product enters the operations and maintenance phase. So, let us also keep into mind na itong forward traceability is very crucial sa part wherein pag nasa maintenance phase na po tayo. Tapos na kasi yung system, i-maintain mo na lang siya, i-update mo na lang siya, or i-upgrade mo na lang siya. Doon daw nagiging crucial itong forward traceability. So, as code and design document is modified, it is necessary to be able to ascertain the complete set of requirements that may be concerned by this or by those modifications. So, bago ka mag-modify, no, kailangan mo munang there should be a certainty na complete yung requirements na yon. Ayan. And then number 9, design independence. Sabi niya, this should be an option to select from multiple design alternatives for final system. More specifically, the SRS should not contain any implementation details. Okay, and then number 10, testability. An SRS should be written in such a method that it is complete or simple to generate test cases and test plans from the report. Okay. Number 11, so understandable by the customer. An end user may be an expert in his or her explicit domain, but should not be trained in computer science. Yan. Understandable, very important itong part na ito, understandable by the customer. It is always important na naintindihan ng customer kung ano yung gusto mong iparating. So, sabi niya, an end user may be, let us take into consideration, no? Ang end user ay may be an expert in his or her explicit domain, but might not be trained in computer science. Hindi lahat ng ating customer ay well-equipped sa computer terms and computer processes. So, we also take into consideration yung case nila. Let us also understand their cases. So, hence, the purpose of formal notations and symbols should be avoided to as much extent as possible. Ayan, wag po tayong maglagay ng mga formal notations na tayo lang ang nakakaintindi, yung mga symbols na tayo lang ang nakakaintindi ng mga computer people or IT people. Kailangan din natin i-consider yung mga customers natin. So, the language should be kept simple and clear. Of course, ito yung explanation ko kanina na kung magko-communicate tayo at magkaiba tayo ng language, there is a misunderstanding, no, between us pag ganon. Number 12, the right level of abstraction. So, if the SRS is written for the requirement stage, the details should be explained explicitly. Of course, you need to explain it thoroughly. Whereas for a feasibility study, fewer analysis can be used. Hence, the level of abstraction modifies according to the objective of the SRS. Okay, so that is the final. I think that ito yung mga nandito sa loob ng illustration natin. So, these are the characteristics of a good SRS. And I hope naintindihan po natin siya, yung 12, no, na characteristics of a good SRS. And so, here, I also included a definition of this software requirement specification. Okay, so it says here that SRS is a document that describes the nature of a project, software, or application. So, in simple words, SRS document is a manual, manual, or a documentation. It is a manual of a project provided it is prepared before you kickstart a project or application. So, this document is also known by the names SRS report or software document. Ito yung other term ng ating SRS. A software document is primarily prepared for a project, software, or any kind of application. So, there are set of guidelines to be followed. Ayan, papakita ko sa inyo later on kung ano yung mga different things na kailangan nating ilagay sa ating SRS document or SRS report. So, there are set of guidelines to be followed while preparing the software requirement specification document. So, this includes, of course, the part of the introduction. Nandyan yung purpose, nandyan yung scope, functional and non-functional requirements, software and hardware requirements of the project. In addition to this, it is also contains the information about environmental conditions required, safety and security requirements, software quality attributes of the project, and etc. So, yun lang yung mga other things na pwede daw na ma-contain ng ating SRS document. Ipapakita ko po sa inyo mamaya kung ano yung mga different parts niya. So, ano tong sinasabi natin na requirement specification document? So, pag sinabi natin SRS document, it describes the intended purpose, requirements, and nature of a software to be developed. And dinedescribe niya lang daw kung ano yung purpose niya, yung requirements na kakailanganan natin doon sa system or doon sa software na i-develop natin later on. So, it also includes the yield and cost of the software. Ayan, this is also important, yung cost ng ating software, kung magkano kaya, kung ano yung budgetary requirements ng ating system. And then, in this document, flight management project is used as an example to explain few points. Okay? So, ito po yung example ng mga different parts ng SRS document, but we are not going to create a detailed one, no? I will just give you later on some parts, and then yun yung natin. Yun po yung i-accomplish natin. Ayan, so here we have the part of the introduction, and then yung purpose. Let us also understand na magkakaiba po yung yung format ng isang SRS document. Merong mga ibang formats na pina-follow. Pero ito po yung fa-follow natin. Ayan. First one is the introduction. Under introduction, we have the purpose, intended audience, and reading suggestions, project scope, preferences. Ayan po yung parts ng introduction. We also have the overall description. Meron tayong hanggang 2.6. So we have product perspective, product features, user classes and characteristics, operating environment, design and implementation constraints, assumptions and dependencies. And then we also have number 3, we have the system features and functional requirements. And then number 4, external interface requirements, user interfaces, hardware interfaces, software interfaces, and communications interfaces. And lastly, we have the non-functional requirements. These are the performance requirements, safety requirements, security, and software quality attributions. So, yan po yung mga different parts ng ating SRS document. So, here, naglagay lang po tayo dito, breakdown lang natin. So, part lang po ito, no, under introduction. So, let's start with the purpose. So, for the purpose, dito po ilalagay, sabi niya, the purpose of this document is to build an online system to manage flights. This is an example of a purpose na ilalagay natin sa SRS, no? Pag nag-create kayo ng SRS document niyo, pwede nyo ilagay. For example, no, you're going to create an online system. Ayan, so, the purpose of this system is to build an online system to manage flights and passengers to ease the flight management. So, as you can see, meron tayong note dito, it include the purpose or as applicable to your projects. For example, no, mag-create tayo ng system na magmamanage ng flights and tsaka passenger, ilagay mo dito sa may purpose mo kung ano yung purpose nung system na gagawin mo. So, ganun din, this is also applicable on different systems. So, for example, no, gagawa tayo ng sales and inventory system. So, ilalagay natin dito, the purpose of this document is to build a sales and inventory system that will manage the sales and inventory report of CSUPAT. Parang ganon. Okay, so that is the purpose. Ganon po kayo maglagay dapat ng purpose ng inyong SRS document. Okay? 1.2. Okay, under 1.2 is the intended audience and reading suggestions. Sasabi niya dito, this project is a prototype for the flight management system. Ito na yung sinasabi niya dito sa purpose niya. So, flight management system pala yung tawag doon. And it is restricted within the college premises. This has been implemented under the guidance of college professors. This project is useful for the flight management team and as well as to the passengers. So, kung papansinin ninyo, nilagay niya dito yung scope and delimitation. Sabi niya, this project is a prototype. So, hindi pa siya fully blown system. This project is a prototype for ito yung pangalan ng ating system na flight management system. So, it is also important na ilagay niyo dito. Or this project, or this proposal, pwedeng gamitin natin yung word na yon. Lalo na pag proposal yung ginagawan mo ng SRS document. It is a prototype. Ayan. Or a sample program. O, ganun. Pwede natin gamitin yan. So, this project is a prototype for the flight management system. Ayan, nilagay niya yung restriction niya. And it is restricted, ayan yung scope and delimitation niya, no? Within the college premises. Hanggang sa college premises lang daw yung prototype na yon. So, for example, mag-create ka lang ng system or magpo-propose ka ng system para sa isang restaurant. So, doon lang sa restaurant na yon, magte-take place yung proposal na yon. Wag mo nang, or doon sa branch na yon, wag mo nang kunin yung other branches kasi magfo-focus ka lang sa branch na yon. So, ilagay nyo doon sa intended audience and reading suggestions later on. Sabi niya, this has been implemented under the guidance of college professors. So, for example yan, magka-create ka ng system mo, no? Ang ilalagay mo, hindi na college professors, pero doon sa advisor mo. This will be, kasi future tense tayo, this will be implemented. This will be, so magiging will be na yan. This will be implemented under the guidance of our system advisor. Okay? Kung advisor po yung mag-ano sa inyo, mag-guide sa inyo, or from of our subject teacher, pwede lang din po yan, or of the panelists, yan, pwede lang din po. Depende kung ano yung ilalagay mo, or depende kung yung project mo is ongoing, kung proposal pa lang, or tapos na. And then, this project is useful for the flight management team and as well as to the passengers. So, ilalagay mo na dito kung ano yung magiging benefits nung gagawin mong system. Another one, project scope. Sabi niya, the purpose of the online flight management system is to. Ayan, parang itong project scope ay parang statement of the problem na natin yan. Kasi meron tayong to. Ayan, ito daw yung mga gagawin niya. To ease flight management, and to, ayan, may to na naman. Create a convenient and easy to use application for passengers trying to buy online or airline tickets. So the system is based on a relational database with its flight management and reservation functions. So we will have a database server supporting hundreds of major cities around the world, as well as thousands of flights by various airline companies. Above all, we hope to provide a comfortable user experience along with the best pricing available. So kung papansinin ninyo, sinabi niya yung mga scope ng kanilang system, or kung ano yung gagawin ng system nila in detailed form. And doon sa pinakala, sabi niya, above all, we hope to provide yan kung ano yung magiging expectations ng ating mga customers later on doon sa proposal or doon sa system natin mismo. So, you may follow this format, no? But, you may follow this format, pero wag nyong i-follow or wag nyong i-copy and toto yung mga words niya. Kasi magdedepende pa rin kayo doon sa magiging feature ng system na gagawa nyo ng ganitong document. Okay? And then, 1.5, or, sige, 1.4. Ayan. 1.5 are the references. Ayan. Pwede kayo maglagay ng references. Ito yung mga references namin sa pag-create ng aming document. Ito yung link kung saan namin kinuha itong part na ito. Pwede kayong maglagay. And then, fundamentals of database systems by. Okay, nilagay nila ito. This is just a book. And then, nilagay din kung sino yung mga tao na author na yan. Okay, so you need to fix this one. I wasn't able to fix this one. Or you can, if you search it on internet, lagay niyo yung, or nag-search kayo sa internet ng mga nilagay niyo dito sa SRS document ninyo, pwede niyong ilagay sa references ninyo. Huwag yung ariin yung thought na yon kung hindi naman originally sa inyo. Okay? So, yun yung mga different parts ng ating introduction. Under introduction lang po yung gagawan natin kasi masyadong marami ito. And of course, the system features yung functional at saka non-functional. Na tinuro ko naman na sa inyo doon sa pinakataas. And dun sa pinakataas, nilagay ko na or in-explain ko na kanina kung ano yung difference ng functional at saka non-functional. At naglagay na rin ako ng mga examples. So, ipa-follow nyo na lang po yun. Okay? And then, we also have here, lastly, ayan, last na part is the properties of a good SRS document. Thank you for staying with me. Ayan, so last na po ito. So, the properties of a good SRS documents, although nalagay na natin dito or na-explain ko na kanina sa inyo yung characteristics, ito naman yung properties. Ayan. So, the essential properties of a good SRS documents are the following. Number 1, it should be concise. So, the SRS report should be concise and at the same time unambiguous. Yan, na-explain na ito kanina doon sa taas, no? Consistent and complete. So, verbose and irrelevant descriptions decrease readability and also increase error possibilities. And then, number 2, structured. it should be well structured. Hindi yung kung ano-ano lang yung mga pinagta-type natin. Dapat maging formal tayo doon sa document natin. A well-structured document is simple to understand and modify. So in practice, the SRS document undergoes several revisions to cope up with the user requirements. Often, user requirements evolve over a period of time. Therefore, to make the modification to the SRS document easy, it is vital to make the report well-structured. Anyways, these are self-explanatory, no? You can just read it anytime later on because I will be uploading this one. Okay, and number 3, I'm sorry also for the background noise because I am recording this at time and hindi natin maiwasan yung mga background noise or yung mga things na howling dogs, mga ganyan. Okay, so please bear with me. And then next is black box view. It should only define what the system should do. Ayan, it's very important. It should only define, there should be a scope and limitation. Huwag ka na mag-add, huwag ka na maglagay ng sobra. Huwag ka rin mag-decrease. Ayan, walang labis, walang dapat kulang. And refrain from stating how to do this. This means that SRS documents should define the external behavior of the system and not discuss the implementation issues. And number 4, and conceptual integrity. It should show conceptual integrity so that the reader can merely understand it. Okay, and number 5, verifiable. All requirements of the system as documented in the SRS document should be correct. Ayan, this means that it should be possible to decide whether or not requirements have been met in an implementation. Okay, so yun po yung mga properties of a good SRS document that I also explained it partly doon sa things that you need to consider to create good SRS. Okay? So that is the end of our discussion and on the SRS, no, or the requirement analysis and modeling. And I hope you learned something today. Although our discussion is very long, I will just upload the soft copy of this one on Lens. And if you have any questions and clarifications, do not hesitate to ask me. For the activities, I will just post it on Lens. Please check it later on, especially the things that you need to do and the things that you need to submit later on. So everything will be posted on our Lens. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you learned something today. Good day and God bless.